So welcome everyone to the Meghna Conversations. IUCN and Asian Confluence, we are jointly facilitating this Meghna Conversations, which is a series of 3 webinars to raise awareness of the cultural, social, and ecological value of the Meghna River Basin shared by Bangladesh and India. So today is the last webinar of our 3-part, where we are going to focus on bringing people and institutions together for a living Meghna River. So I am Khalid. I work for IUCN Bangladesh. And today we have a group of distinguished panelists and speakers to discuss about the topic. I would soon request all of them to briefly introduce themselves.
Yes, thank you so much and a warm welcome from the Asian Confluence and the IUCN on this 3rd webinar on the 3 parts of the Meghna Conversations. Today's conversation is on building people and bringing people and institutions together for a living Meghna River. And we are living in eventful times. And I think that post-COVID, the role of community participation, the role of awareness of the last mile and involvement of the last mile in implementing policies will become even more important. And in that context, the many policies and frameworks that are being emerging in the region and bringing that and connecting that to the people, bringing institutions and people together, we thought is of great significance. Both sides, we have Mr. Sampath Kumar today, Chief Executive Officer of the Meghalaya River Basin Development Authority, who's also looking after the health. I know that the states of the northeastern region in India have heavily focused on agriculture, fisheries, development as a economic recovery step in these times. And again, this becomes very important. Similarly, from the Bangladesh side, we have Ms. Mahbooba, Panna, and Mr. Rizwana, Hasan. Mahbooba represents the Ministry of Fisheries. We also have Ms. Rizwana Hasan, who is the Chief Executive of the Environmental Laws Association of Bangladesh. And today we will also have a special presentation by Dr. Shawahiq Siddiqui, partner of the Indian Environmental Law Association and Supreme Court lawyer, and some final concluding remarks by none other than Dr. Alejandro, director of the IUCN Bonn Environmental Law Center, who we've had so much benefit from many of his workshops. So on that note, I think, again, a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shawahiq Siddiqui. I'm an environmental law practitioner based at New Delhi, and I have been involved on transboundary water cooperation work for a long time now in South Asia. And I have done some work as part of the Meghna policy analysis, which I'll share in the due course. Thank you.
This is Sampath Kumar, working with the government of Meghalaya. I'm also the Chief Executive Officer of Meghalaya Basin Development Authority.
Good afternoon and Assalamu Alaikum. My name is Mahbooba. I work as Joint Secretary I'm in Fisheries and Livestock. And I especially look after some of the inland water, something to do with fisheries production that are related with land leasing also. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Rizwana. I'm a lawyer. I work for an NGO, Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, and I perhaps belong to the people part of today's presentations.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody from Bonn, from Germany. My name is Alejandro. Greetings to you all, and it's very nice to see some faces that I know from the past. I work for IUCN in the German office, and I am the director of the Environmental Law Center. A real pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, everyone. So the Shawahiq, he has an is an interesting presentation, and he has looked at the policies in both Bangladesh and in India in terms of Meghna Basin, like how those policies are facilitating natural resource management in both sides.
Thank you, Khalid bhai. I don't know if it is interesting. We might certainly try to make it engaging in a span of 10 minutes or so. So we did a little analysis of what exists in the Meghna Basin from the perspective of understanding the governance on both sides. So anyone having interest in the GBM Basin would know that while the two basins are relatively studied and researched more, the Ganga and the Brahmaputra, Meghna Basin is less researched, less understood, both from the technical, scientific perspective as well as from the policy and legal perspective. So here is an attempt to initiate that inquiry and understanding and map in terms of what exists. What is the big picture in the Meghna Basin? So we tried to look at what are the kind of instruments, how many instruments, and we could figure out there are as many as 285 instruments that you can look at, both in India and Bangladesh, which directly or indirectly will touch upon environment management as well as natural resource governance in the basin. But we picked 65 instruments, both in the upstream and the downstream. When I say upstream, I mean 6 northeast Indian states in India, and downstream means the northeast region of Bangladesh, which is part of the Meghna Basin. So there are these 65 instruments which we tried to understand and tried to distill in the context of looking at what are the key drivers and what are the key areas which could trigger or create windows of opportunities for enhancing or building on the cooperation between the two countries. So as an outline, as I said, what is the what's coming up? So in order to understand what exists, for example, in the upstream, in the 6 northeast Indian states that are part of the Meghna Basin, or the Barak Basin as it is known as there, we have to understand the basic framework in terms that in India, there is a scheme of central laws, central environmental laws that apply anywhere in India, including in the northeastern states. The exception is that northeast is constitutionally special in India, and therefore these laws do not apply unless states want them to apply. So this is known as the special status of northeastern states in India under the constitution, which is governed by scheduled 6 areas, and then 2 other constitutional provisions governing Nagaland and Manipur. So we have 6 states, Meghalaya, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Nagaland. And out of these, 4 are 6 scheduled states and 2 are non-6 scheduled states. What that means is when you say 6 scheduled states, they have a very region-based, area-based autonomous institutions called ADCs, Autonomous District Councils, who have the authority to formulate laws on almost all the natural governance areas, forest, water, land, etc. Non-scheduled states, they do not have local institutions called ADCs, but they do have local institutions by the name village councils. So Manipur and Nagaland are the 2 non-scheduled states. So that's the larger picture in the upper and the upstream of the Meghna Basin. In the downstream, what we find is that there are no states, of course. There are national planning policies and strategies and action plans, a number of instruments. But at the same time, these instruments are owned by different departments who work no less than different states, and they have their own territorial, their own domain areas where they have created these policies, plans, strategies, master plans, etc., and they try and implement them. So that's the big picture. So in India, in the upstream, you have the federal structure, national policies, state policies, and the third tier comes where you have autonomous district council who have their own laws and policies. In Bangladesh, you have national plans and policies, but these are dispersed between different departments, as many as 9 or 10 of them, 5 departments being the key under the Ministry of Water Resources directly, and then the allied ministries. Now, here is a snapshot of what I would try to illustrate as what exists or what kind of provisions exist when we try to look at water governance in the upstream in the 6 northeastern states in India. So the origin of the river, as well as it trickles down, flows down through different states into Bangladesh, and how it is governed by different instruments and different water policies is attempted in this chart. Now, if you try to look at the leftmost column, we tried to put at least 7 thematic pillars or 7 areas against which the governance is being analyzed. So if you want to understand how our policies plays in terms of integrated basin approach, so what you would find is that Meghalaya and Nagaland have very good provisions on integrated water approach, whereas other states, for example, Assam, Manipur, Mizoram, and Tripura do not have as good provisions. So there's a little color coding here. So green indicates a good provision or a provision that will go far and beyond in helping the state in doing what it intends to do. The orange color indicates that the provision is there, but it's very restricted, limited. And then there are gray areas and unique provisions that are colored very differently. So for example, now, if you want to look at, is there a recognition of environmental flow in the policies in all the 6 states in the upstream? Which states talk about environmental flow? So we do not have information for at least 3 states, but as far as Assam, Meghalaya, and Nagaland are concerned, we do have their policies who talk about environmental flows. Now, which state does the best in terms of environmental flow? So you have Assam, which in fact has a draft water policy, but it has a certain very unique provision. What it says is minimum good quality water flow would be ensured. So it's not the quantity that a state policy is talking about, it is also quality of water. That is the kind of approach, that is the kind of element we want to look at in the policies, where they go beyond the normal, and we were trying to identify such provisions throughout the framework. Then you try and see how is transboundary cooperation addressed in the state water policies in the 6 northeastern states. So while international cooperation and transboundary cooperation is an exclusive domain of the central government as per the Constitution of India, the federal arrangement is such that on water, that cooperation is routed through states. The legality of it is undercurrent, whereas it is more of a political and cooperative nature. So you can say it's a cooperative federalism kind of a scheme that goes on. So West Bengal has to be consulted before any cooperation happens with Bangladesh. And similarly, other states that have boundary or river sharing with Bangladesh have to be consulted. But whether states recognize that position is an issue that we wanted to examine. And what we found is that Meghalaya, if you look at the 7th row in the chart, and you will see the only green that you have in this row is Meghalaya, which not only says that international and cross-country rivers will be dealt with by the union government, but it emphasizes that they have to be dealt with in consultation with the states. Now, other states also talk about transboundary cooperation, but they state the obvious legal position, saying that transboundary issues will have to be dealt by the central government. So, which is a fact and which is a legal position. The state has not put its position as to what role it wants to play. So, out of the 6 northeastern states, Meghalaya is the only state that says that a state has to be consulted, and it is in somewhat an emphasis way. On gender inclusion aspects, you have Nagaland as the best state, where role of women in water resources has been emphasized in a very strong way, including their participation in the decision-making in the planning process. You have a similar provision in the Meghalaya water policy, but it's limited. They do not say women as such. What the policy says is it's a participatory water resource management that will be opted. But it does not explicitly say that women and girls and gender, etc., will be mainstreamed through community institutions or community governance. In the Manipur water policy, the impact is acknowledged on girls of misgovernance or lack of governance. At the same time, it's an aspiration to seek their enhanced roles. You can put Manipur and Nagaland at the same footing, but other states do not fare that well in terms of the gender inclusion. What is the one very unique progressive feature in all the state water policies that form part of the Barak Basin or Meghna Basin in the upstream? So in Assam, which shares the immediate border with Bangladesh and the river enters through Assam, the policy emphasizes partnership with communities in water resource management. So that's a striking feature, though it's a draft policy, but we're hearing that the state is going to adopt its slight modification or a new policy soon, which hopefully will contain a similar provision, retain this provision. If you look at Manipur, there's very high importance to gender inclusivity. If you look at Mizoram, the policy is entirely based on climate response. That is its central focus. Meghalaya, again, the unique provision is payment for ecosystem services, which is not there in any other policy in the entire northeastern region. And therefore, a Meghalaya policy is unique and good one on many aspects. If you look at the Meghalaya column, there is no red, it's all green, orange. And therefore, Meghalaya fares on IWRM well. It does have an ecosystem approach, but in terms of the payment, it does have water flow regime addressed in the policy, and it does have PS mechanism and transboundary cooperation very explicitly addressed where state involvement is mandatory. And in Nagaland, the unique feature is the 10 principles of water resource governance. We studied other policies as well in terms of not only water, but how does the state fare well in terms of the other policies, mining, hydropower, climate change. So in the northeastern region, what's happening is that forest is more than 2/3 of the forest is with the community. As I said, there are autonomous district councils. These are tribal councils basically, and they govern and control, and there are unwritten customary laws which are very diverse, and they differ from tribe to tribe, from village to village, and it is therefore difficult to understand all of those laws. But then in terms of the forest governance, there are generic instruments, and there is a Assam forest regulation that applies to Meghalaya. Other states have also adopted one form or the other, but it only applies to 10% of the forest in the catchment. So the message is that if you want to look at what's happening in forest, it is basically community management of forest and community conservation that is driving the protection of the upper catchment of the Meghna Basin. Now, one difference in this entire regime of forest governance in the upper Meghna Basin or the upstream is that while Jhoom, etc. is going on, and it is the way of life for communities in Northeast, there is one state that has come out with a different kind of a policy approach. It is the state of Mizoram, which has drafted a new land use policy. The objective is to wean communities away from slash and burn kind of agriculture, which is detrimental for forests, and it has tried to bring alternative cultivation in place, palm oil farming, etc. But the gender ramifications of this new approach are revealing gradually, are not understood to be in favor of women. Now women are subjected to a far more adverse kind of or submissive role, as the literature talks about. We have not verified it physically or have not been able to interact with anyone directly from among the communities. But then it says that while the policy is good, it tries to wean people away from the detrimental practice of Jhoom. It has adverse impact of women. In terms of climate governance, all states have climate action plans. These are very generic action plans having 8 or 10 missions on each of the areas: forest, water, ecosystems, air, sustainable habitats, etc., and so on and so forth. But not many states have identified clear linkages of climate with transboundary cooperation or with river management. There is one exception to this rule. There is a state climate action plan of Tripura, which is an important. So there are 2 river systems which are very important, which have also been identified and acknowledged in all the plans in Bangladesh. One is Meghalaya, another is Tripura. So the Tripura state action plan clearly says that ownership of rivers is to be decided, which is important from the transboundary perspective. Second, it says that there is going to be established a river authority, which is a unique provision because there is no talk of river authority in the entire region. And then they talk about the siltation of rivers from source to the end. End, I mean, the territory ends. And then we have Meghalaya SAPCC, which talks about the pollution which is going to the downstream. This is a chart of Bangladesh, where you have the most green areas, as you would see on those 7 parameters, where you would say, so now we have 5 or 6 different ministries or departments. Each of them own an instrument. So for example, Water Resource Ministry owns 2 major instruments, the Water Policy and the Water Act, which is the bedrock of water governance in Bangladesh. Then there is a National Water Plan, which builds on the National Water Policy, and we have an area-specific Haur Master Plan and the Delta Plan. Now, in this chart, you will see that these are the very unique features. So in Bangladesh, across the spectrum, you will find that the governance is very evolved. Specific action plans are there, strategic plans are there. You will see all greens. Only orange is that the national policy is of 99, and therefore it is a limited ecosystem focus. And then the master plan for Haur areas will not have the environmental flow because these are Haur ecosystems. In Meghalaya, in Bangladesh, the journal framework on fisheries, the fisheries framework is very evolved actually. So you have 3 types of fisheries. You have private fisheries, you have common fisheries as in Haurs, etc., and then you have licensed fisheries in terms of the Jal Mahals. This is governed by the 3 key legislation in Bangladesh. So one is the Private Fisheries Act, other is the Conservation Act, which has been amended, and then the policies, the fishery policy of Jal Mahal policy of 2009 and the fishery policy of 1998. And the fishery policy of 1998 is actually very conservation oriented, and it talks about ecosystem protection and so forth. In terms of climate change, Bangladesh has done fairly well. So these are not generic plans in Bangladesh we're talking. These have been time-sensitive plans which have been evolving. So we have had first Bangladesh strategy and climate action plan, and then we have NAMAs and NAPAs, and which has now been integrated into the Delta Plan of 2100. And therefore, you have gradual progress on climate action planning in Bangladesh. So the regime in downstream on climate is much more evolved than the generic regime in the upstream. I just wanted to make a point on mining. Surprisingly, in Bangladesh, mining is environmentally sensitive but socially exclusive. So what happens is you have the provision for environmental compensation as per the new mining rules. But then there is no talk about that if a mining is to take place in certain areas, people have to be included for consultation, etc. So here's a chart that explains the comparative perspective in terms of how India and Bangladesh are placed in the basin context. So if you look at 5 or 6 areas on water policies, what you find is that Bangladesh is much more ahead and evolved. At the same time, there is tremendous overlapping and non-coherence. So therefore, synergy and coherence is something that needs to be brought in the water policies and institutional framework in Bangladesh, whereas in India, in the upstream, the policies are fairly new. There are no action plans, and policies talk about setting up new institutional structure. So Mr. Sampath was, of course, talking about that there is a Basin Development Authority in Meghalaya, which is only state to have that exception. Otherwise, in all the other states, they are setting up new institutions. In Meghalaya also, the linkage between the old Basin Development Authority and the new Water Resources Authority that the policy talks about are not clear. On transboundary cooperation, Meghalaya has very clear policy space, whereas in Bangladesh, now it is pertinent to see that there is a very conventional policy position in the National Water Policy 1999, where it says that in all the other 53 rivers, water cooperation will be sought through JRC. So while there is a national policy position on transboundary cooperation, but it is through JRC, which is a very conventional mode. And then it goes on to say that every river is aspired to have a separate treaty to ensure Bangladesh share of water from India. So this is under National Water Plan of 2004. So Water Plan has built on National Water Policy of 1999. These are three key recommendations for Bangladesh. So if you examine all the policies, strategies, perspective plans, investment plans, what you find is that the three pillars of water governance, principles, recognition of water rights, including the right to drinking water, and decentralized governance. These three pillars are missing across the spectrum. So 99 water policy laid the foundation and the aspiration to strengthen local institutions, whereas the progressive policies that have come after that have not laid a roadmap for that. It echoes entirely in all the documents equally in the same breath, saying that the local institutions will have to be strengthened, whereas in terms of rights, what is being said is that rights will be conferred, both individual as well as community rights. For example, Haur Master Plan goes on to say that in Haur areas, rights will be conferred. Similarly, Water Act of 2013 goes on to say rights will be conferred. Water policy goes on to say rights will be conferred. So rights are not recognized, rights will be conferred. This shows that there is a eminent domain centralized approach to looking at water governance, whereas the aspiration is to strengthen local institutions. So that's first recommendation, that the three pillars have to be mainstreamed in the water policies and laws in Bangladesh. The second is we have wonderful documents across, but the convergence is lacking. So we have the Water Resource Ministry, then we have our WAPRO, which is the planning organization, then we have Water Board in Haur areas, then we have our General Economics Division, Ministry of Planning. Each of them have their separate instruments. Each of them sound very similar in terms of the objectives, but then the convergence is lacking. So each ministry can end up doing very similar jobs, and therefore this needs to be brought together. Geography-specific strategies have not been identified. If you collectively look at all the instruments, wonderful instruments, very forward-looking, action-oriented instruments, have so far not helped Joint River Commission or ministries to go for geography-specific, area-specific transboundary cooperation. So while broad vision, broad strategies are there, but they're limited to doing very generic things. And therefore, in terms of identifying cooperation in 53 other rivers and identifying new windows, I think geography-specific and strategy-specific information base has to be supported by all the other allied technical and institutions which are working on water governance. And this is the last slide. Reflections for India. I mean, there's a long way to go. Northeastern states have just started picking up on water governance. Policies are fairly new, as I said. So they all are sharing the same space and the same basin, and all have ambitious policies. Important to say, all of them aspire to have hydropower development, aspire to retain water as much as possible, aspire to extend the water infrastructure, irrigation infrastructure, and therefore will have competing water use in future. So it is only important that they have alternative dispute resolution mechanism in place, which is not there. What water policies in Northeastern states say is that they will go through the national level dispute resolution mechanism, which takes ages to complete, 20 years, 25 years, 15 years. So we have a scheme of water dispute tribunals, and they take 15 years on an average to resolve a dispute. And therefore, first recommendation is there needs to be a more friendly ADR dispute resolution mechanism in all the water policies. The second quick recommendation is that water policies in northeastern states and upstream are geared towards service delivery. It rains so much there. It's a good idea to catch that rain, have rainwater harvesting, which will also help that system to be dynamic as it was and help the downstream flow. The third recommendation is that while ADCs and VCs are constitutionally active in the area, water policies only generically say community involvement. They do not really devolve real power that needs to be devolved, which is very similar to in Bangladesh. In fisheries, there is tremendous scope for cooperation. So far, fisheries management, fisheries policies in northeastern states are centralized, as in Bangladesh, but there is a greater role of ADCs and village councils there, and they need to be mainstreamed in the fishery management because village councils and ADCs, which are tribal institutions, have their own fisheries laws. So unless they are taken on board on new fishery cooperation, it is not possible to have any kind of transboundary conservation plan to be realized. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shawahiq, for great analysis, I would say. Things which are in paper, obviously, because in your study, you try to focus on what is existing in papers, not what is happening on the ground. Obviously, we will hear more from other speakers what's happening in the ground. And as we are hearing from you, coherence, convergence, domain or territory, and community involvement, but we don't know how much about community empowerment, but we hear more from other speakers. So I would now go to Mahbooba, who is working for the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock and who closely observes the policy formulation process. At the same time, she observes the challenges of policy implementation process in the ground. And we know that we talk about major success of policies in terms of fisheries development, but we would also like to hear from her how much community empowerment we are ensuring through that process based on her experiences.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shawahiq, for the presentation. I mean, it was indeed a pleasure listening to you, the way you have made the comparative, picture of the things done in India and Bangladesh, especially the 7 states of India. I would like to speak about the policy challenges actually right at the moment we are having. Bangladesh government, I think in last 9 to 10 years, they have launched quite a number of laws and regulations focusing on fisheries development. And we have different actually sectors, even in fisheries development, like the inland fisheries, the hatcheries, the coastal belt fishery, the shrimp, the hilsha, which has become a very good success nowadays. So, but at the same time, we have different challenges on these, policy implementation activities we are doing. Let me start with saying hilsha, because since we claim it to be a very successful initiative of the government, that even in 2012, if I'm not wrong, that Bangladesh was not able to meet the inland, their own, need. Since hilsha is a very popular fish in Bangladesh, but we could not even meet our own demand. But from this year, we have started exporting it. So we had a lot of research on hilsha actually. So in different part of Bangladesh on different rivers and even at the coastal belt area. So, and as a result, now we see that Hilsha production has gone quite high. I think the last time, the last statistics we got, it was like 178,000 metric tons, or maybe a little bit more. So it has fulfilled our local demand. Now we are also started exporting it. But today's topic, that bringing people and institute. Okay, we work for the institutes, but when we talk about, I mean, the people, those who are involved with the different type of fish catching, or if I take Hilsha, then what are the challenges there? We have different type of bans. Ban for mother fish to lay eggs properly, so that, and we have ban for the jatkas to grow up. So we have big challenge how to give support to fishermen during that period. Because, you know, WTO, they have different type of conditions that we need to meet. And when we are trying to support our fishermen, it's quite often that from WTO there is an objection. Often we get to know that whether it is becoming some sort of subsidy or not. So it's very difficult. We are always facing this type of challenge from from the international community, because we have signed different agreements for that. So this is one side. The other thing is, since the fishermen, they belong to very poor, walk of the life. So, I mean, putting or keeping them away from fishing for like 2 months. So, I mean, providing them at least the staple food, the rice. So it is also a big challenge for making the proper management. And sometimes still it happens that they go for unlawful fishing. So once again, it comes with us to have a surveillance on the rivers. So it's a huge cost even for the government. I mean, doing surveillance day after day for 2 months. And we have so many rivers and canals to look after. Again, when they are caught, so another thing comes with the punishment process or taking all the legal actions. And it is also very, difficult, to deal, because we are dealing with a very poor people, poor farmers. So, so the punitive actions, it is also a big challenge for the government. Another thing which is related with the environmental issue, like every year we seize a huge quantity of unlawful fishing nets. And you must have noticed that often we go for burning it. So once again, it is bringing another threat for the environment. So, we are claiming, no doubt, that Hilsha production has gone up, but at the same time, bringing people the word. How far actually how good we are dealing with that part. Okay, now let me focus on some other projects that government is now, giving priority, especially with the community development. Let me just discuss one issue in this way, that from the Jalmahal management point of view, or the certain river, it's maybe a particular portion, the fishers, those who are doing cage fishing or cage fishery culture. So they try to work in a community, but the challenges are still with, fish landing ports and food processing. I think it's a big challenge still for Bangladesh government to build the food processing centers very near to the landing stations. This is another, the thing I was telling, that having the landing stations and having food processing, centers, bringing these two very close is a big challenge still for us. Even yesterday, I had a letter from certain DC of a district, deputy commissioner, asking for a food processing center at his district and near the landing station. On the other hand, I think 1 month back, I had another request that they want a landing station because the production, especially with the Beal area, they have a huge production, but they don't have a very good landing station. So, so these are the things. And let me cover another area, that how well we are engaging women in this sector. Fishery business is a little bit untraditional. As an entrepreneur, it was a little bit untraditional entrepreneurship for women, like maybe 20 years back, but it is no more, because a huge number of labor actually from women working in this sector, especially the dry fish. It is absolutely taken care by the women, even in small villages in Bangladesh. So presently, if I talk from the institutional point of view, the present DG of our fishery department, she is a lady. So she is also, and the different projects we are taking now, it is kind of a must for us to ensure how much or what portion of the project implementation things are occupying women, or they are targeted on women. We have to make it very clear on the project document. This is the things actually the way I'm working. So I started, I have spoken from my work experience. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahbooba. I think from you, we can relate like the policy implementation challenges in the ground, despite having so many policies. And you have pointed out the importance of ILSHA. Obviously, fisheries is a big part of the discussion when we talk about benefit sharing in Meghna Basin, and ILSHA is a big element there. But then you also indicated like it has a cost, conservation is a cost in terms of like government to ensure that, and it's a big cost for the community and for the women, as we see from the ground when the men fisher folks are taken to the prison. I have seen those stories very closely. So we would now go to Rizwana, who works on environmental justice issue very closely. And as we see in Bangladesh, our judiciary plays a strong role often in terms of facilitating few things for the government so that government can do things easily, and at the same time they also take some actions to ensure people's rights. and Rizwana observed that very closely, as well as she tries to ensure those. So we would like to hear from Rizwana those experiences, and also like sharing her observation on the discussions we are having so far.
Thank you very much, Khaled. And so while I'm traveling, I would like to share with you my thoughts on the topic. We are dealing with two heavily loaded agenda, three rather. One is people, other one is institution, and the third one is Meghna, which is a transboundary river. When we talk about connecting people with institutions and policies, it's very important for us to know who are we referring to as people, because it's a transboundary river we are talking about, and what kind of institution are we really envisioning? Do we really have a concrete idea about what kind of institution it would look like? What would be its mandate? Because I was going through the mandate of the Joint River Commission this morning, since I'll be talking on this, and I found that the mandate of the Joint River Commission is actually maximizing the benefit of the shared rivers, which of course includes Meghna, and to talk about flood and irrigation. I haven't really seen anything that talks about the conservation aspect of transboundary river included in the mandate of the Joint River Commission. When we talk about policies, let us just flag one issue, that the UN convention that we have in hand that talks about transboundary rivers and attempts to address both the conservation and utilization aspect of shared rivers haven't been ratified by any of the South Asian countries. Given that we haven't ratified that convention, it is now left to the governments to decide on what kind of conservation policies they would put in place, if at all, about the transboundary rivers. And I say if at all, because our respective governments, Indian governments and Bangladeshi governments, haven't managed to solve the water sharing issue of transboundary rivers, and rivers that do not have water, have excess water, have polluted water, and there are transboundary dimensions to all these issues, cannot be conserved with the best model in mind. So I understand that we are not talking about water sharing today, but we are talking about a river. And if you want to talk about the ecology of the river, the life of the river, as you are saying, living Meghna, then you have to really talk about water, the water quality, the volume of water, the water-related activities of it. Unfortunately, the two governments have failed to come to definite resolution on this. In the Bangla Joint River Commission that we have, out of 4 members of that commission, 2 are engineers. So rivers are matters of engineering, and rivers are not really matters of conservation or fishermen. So engineers talk about what is to be done about rivers. Of course, there is scope for having expert level committees, but when engineers have or the committees that are comprised with engineers haven't managed to come to solution about water sharing of the rivers, I think we are stepping forward, rather jumping to an approach that would, as we call it, ensure that our Meghna will be a living entity. Coming to the approach with which we should look at it, when we talk about policies, are we talking about an anthropocentric approach for the river, or we want to talk about an ecocentric approach to the river? The judgment that has been given by the Court of Bangladesh, which has been really hailed by the Bangladeshi community, actually says that a river has to be considered a legal entity. It's a legal person and it's a living entity as well. But then judiciaries in different parts of India and Bangladesh have looked at rivers differently. if you see the stand of the Indian Supreme Court on rivers and the river linking project, I do not think that is very respectful of rivers as living entities. So Bangladesh, being a downstream country, has its own challenges to really treat and protect its rivers as living entities. In addition to the transboundary challenges, Bangladesh has its own national challenges also. So my first issue would be, when we talk about policies for rivers, policies that the institutions would be guided by and the institutions would be implementing, will we be looking forward to an anthropocentric policy or an ecocentric policy? Second is people. I mean, how do we define people? Indian people and Bangladeshi people. Are we on equal footing? Who are people here? If you see the challenges that Meghna is confronted with, it's pollution, it's encroachment, and it's, of course, flow, navigability of the river itself. So the list of encroachers would tell you that people who depend on the rivers do not necessarily have any say about the management of the river. These 13 entities who have grabbed huge part of the Meghna River are groups like Shah Alam, are groups like Boshundhara, are groups like Meghna. So the common people we are talking about, the fishermen, the women, how do you compare these groups with the people who are in actual control of the river land? We should talk about the National River Commission of Bangladesh. The National River Commission has been entrusted with the responsibility to take care of both the conservation part of the rivers and the encroachment part of the river. And the National River Commission has identified about 2,000 encroachers. The Department of Environment has identified about 2,000 entities that are polluting the river, which has been endorsed by the ADB report that was published in 2019, whereas the River Commission has identified about 13 encroachers of the river Meghna. So when I want to compare the interest of people, the interest of the upper riparian people and the interest of the lower riparian people, do I actually first define the interest of the river, and then we talk about the people? How do we go by that? The other thing is the trust factor. When it's a joint effort of both the countries, there has to be trust between the people of Bangladesh and the people of India. When the Feni River water sharing agreement has been signed, I don't think the people of Bangladesh or the experts of Bangladesh or the civil society of Bangladesh was at all consulted. We were rather totally surprised to hear about this sort of an agreement. So when we don't have a process of regular consultation between respective government and its constituency, then it becomes an extra challenge to talk about conservation of a transboundary river at a regional level. When my previous speaker panelist has talked about the Jal Mahal policy, which is the policy that's about leasing out of the water bodies. And according to the Jal Mahal policy, you can't be leasing out the open river bodies, which means Meghna or part of Meghna can't be leased out. But we are seeing in newspaper every month that part of Meghna is being encroached. People are, having and creating encircles to do their fish cultivation therein. So this is happening. In the Jal Mahal policy, while I very much hail the provision about, not leasing out open water fisher bodies, there is a requirement that the water bodies shall be leased out to genuine fishermen's cooperative. Now, does my government not know that genuine fishermen will not be able to pay the lease money that the government is asking for? Is it not known to my government? It is definitely known to my government. So Meghna is not being leased out, but parts of Meghna or water bodies that are supported by the Meghna water, like parts of our ecosystem, those are being leased out. And if the Jal Mahal policy is to be religiously taken, then the leases that are being given, the government is trying to say that these are being leased out to cooperatives. But do fishermen's cooperative have money to pay the lease amount that the government is asking for? How much revenue is the government earning by leasing out these wetlands? I think that's something very important for us to know if we are to talk about the conservation of the river, and if we are to emphasize on community-based management. Because if it is community-based management, then you don't really have to lease it out. And if you compare the benefits of a successful community-based management versus the management of a leased out water body, I'm sure the community-based management system will definitely get much more points. But we really do not have a law on fish sanctuary. We do not have a law that defines fishermen. We also do not have a law that defines community-based management of natural resources like forest and fishery. Meghna is still a less polluted water body in Bangladesh. That's why the people of Dhaka, who have polluted all the 7 rivers that flow through Dhaka and around Dhaka, are now moving to Meghna to get their drinking water. But the Meghna water quality has also been labeled by ADB as in critical policies as per the Environment Conservation Act right away. Then the water quality of Meghna will also go down very fast and we'll not be able to get our drinking water from Meghna. The other problem that I would flag here is sand extraction. Meghna is a very favorite place for the sand extractor, and there are about 3 identified balu mahals in Meghna. And every year we see unrest, deterioration of law and order situation because of fight over sand extraction, and we also see increased erosion in some part of Meghna due to this unregulated sand extraction. Under the law, there is definitely provision that the deputy commissioner, before declaring a particular area as Balu Mahal or Sand Mahal, can go for an environmental and social impact assessment, but in reality that does not happen. I will also say the same thing about the Feni water sharing. Signed it. The government definitely did not take its mandate from the general people or the civil society. It never had a consultation. And I also don't think the government conducted an environmental and social impact assessment of the agreement. And the issue of mistrust gets really complex there because we are kept in the dark. We do not have information about it. So information sharing is also of paramount importance in any regional policy that we can think about. And the degree of mistrust further aggravates when we see that an engineering student was killed by his batchmates or senior students because he posted something against that very treaty. So with that degree of non-disclosure of agreement, talking about bringing people together may not be a very realistic idea. So what the civil society can do, the civil society can start gathering their own data, their own information, create their own database, share information, and that approach, to the best, as I understand it, to the best of my understanding, should be ecocentric and not anthropocentric. So let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rizwana.
May I just flag one clarification? This is connected to what Rizwana Appa said.
Please do.
All right. So it was said that JRC does not have any mandate. So first clause of JRC, of course, does not have the mandate. It says flood control, etc. But you look at the second clause, and it says any other cooperation that the countries may decide. So any other cooperation may bring in conservation in other areas that the country may want to have. That was the only brief.
Don't rely that much on the may. Let's be specific if we really want a change. Because JRC hasn't been able to solve the flood and irrigation, which is their express mandate. Will they be now working heavily on their may mandate? I don't think so. I think
no, that's right. That's right. But at the same time, these treaties are broad-based. So therefore, the benefit of positivity has to be given.
Yes, Shawahiq, thanks for your reliance on policies, your trust on policies, and the opportunities we can explore from there. So we now move to Dr. Alejandro, who has the opportunity of looking at different shared river basins across the world. And we would like to hear from him, considering the Meghna Basin, and since we are talking about the benefit sharing, what sort of lessons we can learn from other shared river basins which we can really bring in terms of discussion?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, still here from Bonn. Listen, there is not much I can say at the moment about the the Meghna River. I mean, you are the experts on the ground. I just wanted to share with you a few ideas about other basins, you know, in terms of joint management, in terms of you know the tangible results, you know, that they have used to bring about the cooperation, you know, in different settings. So let's move out of South Asia, which is your world. And before moving into another geography, you know, I'm going to repeat something that we have to really internalize, you know, and fully understand. Each basin is a world in itself. You know, the Meghna is certainly not the Amazon, and the Amazon is not the Rhine, and the Rhine is not the Nile. And a magic formula that we can use, you know, to promote effective collaboration in a shared basin and have, you know, equitable, beneficial management of a river and shared resources that can be applied to every basin doesn't work. You know, there are diverse social, diverse political, diverse environmental factors that determine that there is not that size that fits all, you know, in this context. And at the same time, I think that the conflict and the cooperation, and this is something that you have heard already, but I like to repeat it anyway, you know, conflict and cooperation are the two different sides of one single coin. You know, this shared basin governance intricacies have two different faces that interact constantly within a given territory and in a particular period of time. And and these two facets are the ones that I would like to share with you when I shared or when I explain the four different settings outside the South Asian context. And the first one is a European one, which I do think that it is worth mentioning, and that's the Rhine River Commission. Here we have a historical development among all the riparian countries that was determined by territorial conflicts and three major wars: 1871, 1914, 1939. There is a strong legal framework. There is a solid institution, not that big, not commensurate with the size of the basin, which is quite significant, you know, in European terms, that is supported by political will of all the states, by trust in the institution, and by an economic integration process, the EU, that is behind all that. As I said, a strong framework which is supported with a sustainable financing also coming from the states, you know, France, Germany, Luxembourg, Holland, and so on and so forth, led to the establishment of what I would say joint programs, you know, that help the basin management, that help the basin restoration, and so on and so forth. Let's move now into another context, you know, closer to the places I come from, Latin America, Central America more specifically. Two small countries, Costa Rica and Panama, they share the basin, very small one that drains into the Caribbean Sea. Here we have a border treaty, not a basin treaty, a border treaty that had nothing to do with water, that allowed to build a kind of river basin authority looking at economic complementarities and based on a bottom-up approach, you know, including the communities, including, you know, the indigenous peoples, including civil society, including local governments. And why was it so? Because there was a border treaty that they used, you know, to challenge or to channel the cooperation on water. And also there were environmental complementarities that play an important role in that sense. there is a transboundary peace park between these two countries that was or somehow triggered, cooperation into the water sector. There are obviously enormous challenges if you compare that reality with the reality of the Rhine that I just described. There is not that solid legal and institutional architecture that requires constant adjustment. There are financial challenges because these countries are certainly not Germany, not France, not the European Union, and most of the interventions are projectized. So if you build a bridge, you need a project to build a bridge. If you build a new harbor, you need a project that the two countries can go and have access to in order to advance cooperation on that. Third example, also Latin American one, but South America. The situation is Ecuador and Peru. They share 9 basins that go into the Pacific, and some of them are tributaries of the Amazon. The scenario is a scenario of recurrent conflicts over undefined boundaries. But after 200 years of tension and armed conflicts between these two countries, there was a peace agreement, not a water agreement, a peace agreement that was signed and somehow opened the door for the establishment of a binational commission that now regulates the 9 shared basins. Still, the institutional framework has to be developed because, a binational commission to manage 9 different basins is not up to the realities. As I said, every basin is a world in itself, and those that drain into the Pacific are not the same as the Amazon. And here, within a confined regional context, you have to apply that idea. So you have to develop committees, you have to develop the institutions to govern all these different basins. But the most important thing to be said here is that the peace agreement inaugurated the cooperation into water. Yeah, and since then, just to give you a figure on how this has had positive effects, in the economies of both countries. The trade, the bilateral trade has increased 7 times. They have had new joint projects, that benefit both countries across these basins in the area of access to water, sanitation, tourism, communication, joint projects, and so on and so forth. Fourth example, Africa, another context, West Africa. The Meghna River Basin, which is shared by 4 countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. Again, a different development in the 1970s through a customs union that was established between Sierra Leone and Liberia. It gave the impulse for larger cooperation in terms of trade. But then these countries realized that they shared a river that comes from Guinea and drains through all the other riparians. And they thought that for the sake of ensuring security, for the sake of ensuring peace, for the sake of taking care of the population, this is the Ebola hotspot of the world, they had to establish some kind of collaboration in the area of water. And therefore, they thought, in this part of the world, civil society is quite strong, the same as in South Asia, of building something around, civil society organization, nurturing and capitalizing on this type of the cooperation, the angle of cooperation, and they created the Transboundary Water Resource Management Committee for the Meghna River. So from a customs union into a river basin organization that still needs to evolve, that still needs to be nurtured, that still needs to be consolidated in a way. What can we learn through these 4 examples that perhaps can help you to go beyond, so to say, the intricacies of Indo-Bangladesh relationships in the Meghna? That, in my view, a way to find transboundary cooperation enablers beyond the business as usual stuff, we can think about basically 5 categories, and allow me to be very brief on them, but to share them with you. One is the scope of the cooperation, and probably we have to reprioritize the scope of the cooperation. In other words, think whether or not the reason why we are cooperating, or we started cooperation, I don't know, 50 years ago, or 40 or 30 or 70, is it applicable today? Is it peace and security what we are really searching for at the moment? Or is it economic growth? Or is it sustainable livelihoods? Or is it transfrontier pollution? Or is it transboundary impacts? Or is it economic integrity or ecosystem integrity, or what? So a reprioritization of the scope of cooperation and rethinking that constantly and iteratively, I think it's very important. You have said that already, but let me just reflect on that from my humble point of view. Second one, I think, is the need to enlarge political will. If we keep on working with the traditional partners, with the central states, we will have to wait until the central states are ready to go. So another way, another parallel avenue, complementary avenue, is to look at the non-traditional partners, also political decision makers. Let's look at the regions, let's look at the provinces, let's look at the municipal authorities, let's look at the communities. They talk, they interact, they are located across the boundaries, so perhaps we can think about how we can use those vehicles to move up and to change a little bit the mindsets of the governments, you know, if there is not much action taking place at that level. I think, you know, and there are very distinct lawyers in this webinar. You will agree with me that at the end of the day, you know, changes can be catalyzed when you enhance capacities of people. Law is well used and is well implemented when the capacities are there. And I think, you know, in terms of water cooperation, and especially transboundary, in the transboundary setting, enhancing technical capacities that have to do with understanding the intricacies of all the matters of issues here, or the capacities to engage meaningfully in a dialogue, to have constructive discussions, to find solutions-oriented ways forward to the different problems that we have, are key for the solution. Increasing financial skills, obviously, you know, it's much easier to get a solution in an environment where the countries have the means. It's a bit more difficult when, you know, the economies, and especially now with COVID even more, you know, they have to find, you know, ways to get the projects together, to sit together, to elaborate, to find the resources to travel, and so on and so forth. And I think also a final word that was said, but I would like really to insist very much on that, as complementary to the non-traditional ways of conducting cooperation and enhancing the governance arrangements in a transboundary setting, is the promotion of inclusive participation. I think that it is key to all of that, the proactive engagement of stakeholders, of all the stakeholders, not only the governmental, but also looking at people, whatever and however you define it. I think, you know, that the previous speaker made a very interesting point about what we understand by people. No matter what, I think that people are essential for the solution. And with that, I think I would like to get back to you and see if there are any questions. As I said, this is, you know, a view from other parts of the world that I hope, you know, can give you some flavor of what other states are doing, what difficulties they are facing, and what could be different avenues for finding sustainable solutions for these different challenges that we are all facing in every basin around the world. Thank you very much.
So, Shawahiq, if you can facilitate this question and answer session.
Thank you very much. So first one that I would like to ask is something related to the integrated management and how the different agencies are cooperating. And there is one question which I would like to put across to Madam Panna from Fisheries Ministry in Bangladesh. One question which came is that there is some plans for making elevated roads in the How region, which might be having impacts on the fisheries. So the question is, how much, like when those kinds of decisions taken, how much the fisheries department and other department who are actually engaged in implementation of those kinds of projects kind of consult each other or cooperate with each other. So just your reflection on that, how the fishery departments work with other agencies for joint planning in the basin.
The problem with Minister of Fisheries and Livestock is that though we work for the fishery products, but we don't have sole claim on water body. It's quite natural because, you know, the water bodies, they are subject to communication system and environmental issues, biodiversity things. So, I mean, even when we are doing our research, we are implementing our agenda. The Environment Ministry, they are even asking whether our things are environment friendly or not. So, I mean, if I talk that in especially, I mean, it's a very good thing happening. Earlier, we had a lot of complaint about not having consultation with the related departments or authorities, but nowadays it is highly, I mean, encouraged, and it is kind of a mandatory to have proper discussion for the coordination. So, and since this question was very specifically on our area, so, you know, our areas, if we talk about Kisharganj or Netrokona or even the northern part of Bangladesh. So, I mean, to make a communication system, if we don't go through it, it's very difficult. And these are the demand of the people of that area for their access to, I mean, better life. So, so we have to adjust with the things. And certainly we are discussed by the roads and highways, by the water resources, and I mean, all the implementing authorities when they take up a project. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. So, I mean, just a follow-up question. Is there a platform where, through which different agencies interact in Bangladesh? Like, is there, like, say, annual meeting where all the main natural resource, all the ministries which are engaged in natural resource ministries come and have a dialogue, like, as an annual event? Is there any such thing? I mean, just for our information.
Firstly, that each ministry, when they go for any project development, plan, all the ministries have their coordination committee. So they must consult with the, the related departments. And when it takes a further step, certainly Ministry of Planning, they have their, committee there where others are members. And if it is something like very special case, in that case, sometimes even the Prime Minister's office, they get involved, they arrange meetings like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One more question, I think this time because Shawahiq has been involved with the policy analysis. One question is coming on the application of rainwater harvesting. I think it was during the first presentation when Mr. Sampath said that even though Meghalaya is one of the regions which get highest rainfall in the world, there are scarcity of water in the lean season. So is there anything regarding rainwater harvesting? How much is this pushed as a part of the policy agenda?
So it's part of the adaptation strategy standard in all the climate action plans, including in Meghalaya. So it is pushed as much as any other generic policy imperative is pushed, since it requires a certain kind of technical skills and there is a capital cost involved. So wherever it is subsidized or incentivized, we see a bit of it is being moved. But rainwater harvesting has not been made mandatory in Northeast. So unless it is being made mandatory, it is not going to pick up. because rooftop harvesting or harvesting in the ground with a certain kind of a structure requires some kind of technical support to be extended by the municipal corporation or local authorities. Unless it happens, it's not going to take place. So far, it has not happened. So it is not mandatory. It is part of the policy. It is being echoed in the policy that rainwater harvesting will be taken up. But there is no roadmap and there is no mandatory rule which has come up. One example I can give you is the South Indian state in India. So, for example, in Tamil Nadu, it has been made mandatory by bringing out a specific bylaw that people who do not put rainwater harvesting structure, their maps will not be legalized or their house clearance will not be given. And house tax, it has been linked to the house tax also. So there are examples in India itself where rainwater harvesting has been made mandatory, and whereas in other states in the Meghna Basin or the Barak Basin, it is not mandatory at the moment. It is part of the policy. It is echoed. It will take up as and when the agencies will decide to make it mandatory.
Okay, so I think the point here is that rainwater harvesting is mostly seen as a part of climate adaptation strategy. So
Yes.
we have one raised hand here, Mrs. Hansa Jasmuddin.
I would like to know if there are, joint management. For a long time, we know that these joint management of rivers are taking place in Europe, in Africa, in South America, even in Mekong River Commission in Asia. Why we can't achieve this at this day and age between India and Bangladesh and perhaps other co-riparians? And Meghalaya is culturally a part of Bengal. We are very much breathtakingly beautiful Meghalaya, and we want to have some cooperation. And why only government institutions? Because they are all dependent on government orders. Why not people-to-people cooperation? I led a movement called People's Initiative for Ganges water sharing, and together we were able to set principles of Ganges Treaty. So IUCN should make it possible to encourage dialogue between people and those who want to go ahead, so that the governments will only listen. We cannot just wait any longer. Thank you. By the way, great presentations. I'm very happy to be able to see so much has happened on the Meghna River Basin, and I hope all other rivers will have the same cooperation from everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I think you were referring to Shawahiq or Dr. Isa. I think both of you can, quickly, if you would like to comment. I think this is a very difficult question. I would just like to add, Ms. Hansa, that for the people-to-people interaction, this was very much highlighted in the 2011 Framework Agreement of Cooperation between India and Bangladesh, which talks a lot about technical cooperation, cultural cooperation, and other things. And that actually mandate goes even to the rivers. But the question is how much and how well we can operationalize those treaties. So if a quick intervention from Shawahiq, I think because I think the next question I can ask Dr. Alejandro, last one, but from Shawahiq on this one, what is your reflection?
So, ma'am, why it's not happening has to be looked in context of a very longish history that has been there on water sharing. I can state from the legal position, it's very much linked to geopolitics and a certain sense of controlling water, and it's genuine because India's projections are that because of its socio-economic development, it is going to need a lot of water. So a country, a sovereign country, will first try and ensure that its citizen gets what it has ensured in its own domestic policies. So, for example, in India, right to drinking water is a fundamental right. And then gradually the rights discourse is also moving up. We are talking about clean rivers, we are talking about IWRM, and a host of things. So once a government makes certain water-related promises and those are enshrined legally, it is its duty to ensure that it ensures its people. Now, all that is contingent and all that is dependent on if we have water. Therefore, water sharing becomes it is not only linked to geopolitics and hydrohegemony and hydrophobia, the kind of jargons that are used in the discourse, but it is very much linked to countries' own socio-economic development. Now, the geographical vulnerability of Bangladesh is that it is in the downstream and therefore water has to go and be shared with Bangladesh. But a part of it is due to the legal position itself, and part of it is due to the socio-economic needs that India has projected and has accounted for its own people. A combination of the two does not allow any major shift from the conventional position that has been there. Add to this is the inertia of the institutions to look beyond their stated mandate which has been there in the 70s. So institutions have also not moved beyond what has been envisaged back in 70s based on technical reports or data that engineers have frozen in time. And therefore, the interventions of the sort that we are trying to make to bring in new perspectives such as benefit sharing, etc., will, I think, open new areas and horizons of cooperation, because typically bureaucrats are not accustomed to listening different ideas. And so therefore they think that water cooperation typically is about just sharing the quantum of water, and the more water you retain, the more secure you are as a country. And therefore that the dominant thought has led India and Bangladesh not to move beyond what has been written in their treaties. I think that is.
Well, thank you. I think well said. And one of the things that we have also realized, this is okay to have something. I mean, first you would like to conserve water for yourself. But the question here is, I think it is something linking to what Dr. Isa said. Point number 2 is having the political will. And that's where we see that if the community on the Indian sides also understand what are the downstream impacts of anything happening in their part of the world, then they can also make the politicians accountable. So it is working a lot at the community level and, engaging them to better understand. I mean, I would like to share one experience with everyone here. After webinars or any work, we write press release and we share it with media. And what we see is that the same press release is taken up by media in Bangladesh, but not that much in the Indian side. Because of course, the Bangladesh side, water is a more important issue and something very high on the priority of, and the cooperation, basically, if you talk about cooperation with India on those issues. So the political will is important. So last question is for Dr. Isa. I mean, somebody is asking that when you spoke about that framework, the question basically says, do you have any reference framework in mind when you mentioned those 5 points to assist on transboundary cooperation? And linking to this, you highlighted that the benefits due to cooperation increase 7-fold. So do you see that rather than, I mean, if we talk about the Meghna Basin, so rather than talking about water, we need to shift completely our focus and we need to talk about trade and economic benefits to build cooperation rather than water. Dr. Isa.
I think it's nice to be said, or easy to be said, and difficult to be applied, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's like the previous speaker said, it's an issue of political will, it's an issue of political perceptions, on the matters at issue. And changing the political will, or enlarging the political will into other area includes a whole set of complexities, because we might say, let's move from A to B and from B to C, but if the countries do not want, what do we do? And then I think, it all depends, events like this, let's do not underestimate, the power of communication, the power of participation, the power of media, the power of sensitization, the power of inclusion and participation, and the power of the dialogues. Because, sometimes, the state and the state agencies are fixed with a particular position, water is power. Water is about allocation of different volumes, and moving beyond that, you need the incentives, and that's why I think I mentioned one particular case, which is the Peru and Ecuador. When the peace agreement came into play, immediately after, year by year, the bilateral trade between the two countries, increased. Now, with the increase of the bilateral trade, this is putting even more pressure on the two countries to continue cooperating on water, because water is a vehicle for trade, and that encompasses also cooperation on other areas, like, for example, transfrontier pollution, which is still unresolved, So now you have the benefits arising from the peace, which is trade, including others, and it's putting pressure on water, so that water becomes another vehicle of the discussion and the interaction between the two countries. So in essence, there is no one perfect way to enter into that. It's an issue of using all these different approaches and finding the entry points, because this is what it really requires, people that can say, this is the right time to enter into negotiations, to foster a dialogue on a new area, on a species, on an ecosystem, or whatever, and perhaps decontextualize the discussion from water and then bring it back to water once these issues are showing, progress in the discussions. I hope this somehow brings some further thinking into the question that was asked, and I saw also the question on trade, and that's why I tried to combine the answer for these two questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We are overrunning almost by half an hour, and thanks to our audiences and the speakers who stay with us till the last moment. Thank you.